Elephants are massive, wrinkled, and quietly majestic, like living monuments. We know they're smart. They solve puzzles, remember faces for decades, and hold grudges longer than your favorite TV drama. But one of the most haunting questions about these gentle giants is whether they mourn their dead. For centuries, tales told of herds gathering around fallen friends, touching bones and tusks as if paying respects. It sounded poetic, but was it real or just human imagination? The fabled elephant graveyards were long considered campfire legend, more myth than science. The rumor: do elephants really grieve? People have long imagined elephants as wise, soulful creatures. Travelers wrote of herds stopping to touch the bones of long-dead companions. Some claimed elephants returned to the same places, almost like paying respects at a cemetery. It makes sense. These animals form close family groups led by matriarchs, communicate over long distances with secret low rumbles, and seem to recognize individuals even after years apart. If any wild animal could feel something akin to grief, surely it would be the elephant. Yet stories alone don't convince scientists. Humans are masters at anthropomorphism. Think of all the times we've decided our pets look guilty or that pigeons on park benches are chatting about us. So, McComb and her colleagues set out to turn elephant mourning from myth into measurable behavior. They needed an experiment that was both controlled and respectful. No easy task when your subjects weigh up to 6 tons and don't take kindly to being rushed. Science in the savannah. The team traveled to Amboseli National Park in Kenya, home to some of the world's most closely observed elephant families. If you imagine an elephant version of a reality show, this would be it. Years of researchers following who's related to whom, who's feuding, and who's raising calves. These elephants were perfect for a study about memory and social bonds. The setup was deceptively simple. The researchers placed 3 different objects on the ground, about 30 meters from the nearest elephants. Sometimes it was an elephant skull, a piece of ivory, and a plain old log. Other times the objects included skulls of other big animals like buffalo or rhinos. The scientists then sat back with cameras and binoculars, waiting to see what caught an elephant's interest. Picture a wildlife version of a game show. Will our contestants choose the log, the buffalo skull, or the shimmering ivory? Stay tuned. Ivory takes center stage. The first round of experiments revealed something striking. Whenever an elephant had the choice between an elephant skull, a chunk of ivory, and a piece of wood, it headed for the ivory like a kid running toward candy. The fascination wasn't fleeting. They didn't just sniff and wander off. Instead, they explored it with their trunks, lingered, and even rocked the ivory gently beneath their sensitive, vibration-detecting feet. This was no casual curiosity. And remember, ivory was often the smallest object offered, so it wasn't about size. Something about ivory drew them in powerfully. Skull over novelty. In another trial, the scientists decided to test whether the elephants were simply attracted to strange, unfamiliar objects. Surely a rhino skull would be weirder than yet another elephant bone, right? Wrong. When presented with a lineup of skulls, 1 elephant, 1 buffalo, 1 rhino, the elephants still lavished their attention on the elephant remains. They ignored novelty in favor of familiarity, almost like saying, "Oh, a rhino skull." Interesting. Anyway, let's get back to the important stuff. This suggested the animals weren't just curious about anything new. They seemed to recognize that elephant bones belonged to their own kind and deserved special attention. Family recognition, not quite. The next step was the most dramatic. Elephant families are famously close-knit, especially around their matriarchs, wise old females who lead the group and pass down survival knowledge. If elephants can mourn, maybe they could recognize the bones of their own leaders. To test this, McComb's team tracked down 3 families that had recently lost their matriarchs. They presented each group with 3 skulls, their own deceased matriarchs, plus the matriarchs from the other 2 families. Imagine the tension. Would the elephants pause at the familiar face, or rather, familiar skull? Surprisingly, they didn't. The elephants showed equal interest in all the elephant skulls, not picking out their own. Whatever drew them to the remains wasn't specific personal recognition. They seemed to care that these were elephants, but not necessarily their elephants. Why bones fascinate giants? So why this special attention to elephant remains? The answer is still a mystery. One idea is that bones trigger memories or emotional arousal, even if the animal can't identify exactly who it belonged to. Elephants have incredible memories and complex social networks. Encountering remains might spark curiosity or even a sense of loss without clear recognition. Another theory, suggested by UK elephant behavior expert Dr. Paul Rees, is that tusks sometimes have distinctive shapes. An elephant could, in theory, recognize an individual by its tusks, though this study didn't find proof. There's also the possibility that bones are simply fascinating to a highly tactile, intelligent creature. Elephants explore the world with their trunks and feet. Something as big and unusual as a skull may be an irresistible puzzle. What's clear is that their fascination isn't random. Most mammals barely notice they're dead. Lions will sniff a corpse and, if hungry, dig right in. Chimpanzees show some sadness but quickly abandon a decaying body. Elephants, on the other hand, treat the long-dead bones of their kind with deliberate care and interest, sometimes returning to them years later. Mourning or something else? All of this leaves scientists grappling with the tricky concept of mourning. Humans like neat emotional boxes, sad, grieving, remembering, but animals may not feel or express loss the way we do. Instead of asking whether elephants mourn in our human sense, it may be better to say they respond socially and emotionally to death. They notice when one of their kind has died. They investigate the remains with gentle attention. They seem unsettled or agitated in the presence of a carcass. That alone sets them apart from nearly every other mammal. It's not candlelight vigils or elephant funerals with speeches and trumpet solos, but it is something unique. A quiet recognition of death and belonging. Why this discovery matters. Beyond tugging at our heartstrings, this research has practical importance. Ivory poaching remains a huge threat to elephants. Understanding how elephants behave around the remains of their kind could help conservationists predict where herds might go after a killing. If they're drawn to bones, they might return to dangerous poaching grounds and risk further losses. It also challenges us to rethink animal intelligence. For years, humans assumed complex grief was our thing alone. But as we study more species, crows gathering around their dead, dolphins carrying deceased calves, even dogs lingering near a friend's body, we're seeing that the emotional lives of animals are richer than we imagined. Elephants, with their decades-long social bonds and extraordinary memories, are emerging as some of the most emotionally sophisticated animals on Earth. Elephants and us, kindred spirits. The more we learn about elephants, the more familiar they seem. They live in tight families led by wise grandmothers. They teach, protect, and comfort one another. They remember old allies and enemies for decades. They show excitement at births and distress at deaths. Replace trunks with hands and add Wi-Fi, and they'd fit into a group chat. Perhaps that's why humans feel such a kinship with them. There's something humbling about watching an animal so different from us pause to acknowledge it's dead. It reminds us that empathy isn't our private club. Life on Earth has been weaving it into its creatures for millions of years. A gentle, sometimes funny perspective on death. Even amid the seriousness, there's a quirky charm in how elephants explore death. Picture a 5-ton animal nudging a skull with the delicacy of someone testing a piano key or rocking a piece of ivory underfoot as if trying out new dance moves. Imagine a herd stopping mid-journey to gather silently around a sun-bleached skull, as though saying, "Hey, remember Jerry? Good guy. Stole my favorite acacia once, but we loved him anyway." That mix of tenderness and everyday practicality is strangely comforting. It suggests that even in the wild, life and death exist side by side without drama or denial. Elephants seem to say, "Yes, one of us is gone. We remember, and we keep moving." If you found this glimpse into the secret emotional lives of elephants as fascinating as we did, hit that like and subscribe and turn on the bell so you don't miss our next adventure. Until then, stay curious,